one is hot.
Lob for Capella, makes the catch in traffic and drops it through. And then
Whoa. Milwaukee started this game with no energy against the Hawks, and then it got worse for them in that third quarter, Key, when Giannis went down with that knee. And it looked like he kind of like hyperextended that knee. Obviously, going to have a lot of testing and imaging done on the knee today, and we'll finally get some prognosis on what's going on with him. But I tell you what, from the start, Key, you could tell that Milwaukee kind of walked onto the court and said, oh, Trae Young's not playing? You know, we got this game. And the Hawks got right after him, but, man, this game certainly turned in that third quarter when Giannis – because even though it was in Atlanta, the entire arena went quiet when Giannis limped off the floor.
Well, I think first off, you don't want to ever see any player suffer an injury, whether it's your opponent or not. So – the arena would be silenced. Yeah. Atlanta's we're not dealing with Philadelphia.
Right.
This is not one of those situations where people are going to be clapping and doing those sort of things. So you always, especially one of the bright young stars of the NBA, goes down with a knee injury, and the first thing he says, oh, man, I hope this ain't one of those.
Yeah.
But, when they started the game, it was one of those deals where it's like, okay, Trae Young's not going to be playing. Milwaukee, I'm going to peek my head in and out because Milwaukee should win this game. I mean, they should when you think about it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Giannis is shooting threes,
airballing threes.
And he's like, well, wait a minute, man. This is different than game 3. This is, what are you doing here?
Right.
And then they get off into a situation where, they're playing catch up. And so you're like, okay, the fourth quarter isn't here. But NBA basketball, for me, really starts in the fourth quarter. I mean, for the most part. So you thought that they would, that little bit of lead that Atlanta would have eventually would get sucked up in the second half, but it never did.
Right.
It was one of those deals where it was kind of like you could tell Milwaukee didn't come to play.
Right.
They just showed up. And think that it was going to be much of a cakewalk by them just showing up because the heart and soul and the leader of the Atlanta Hawks was cheering from the sideline.
Yes.
And that wasn't the case.
Yes.
And then they looked up and they were so far behind that there was no catch-up to be had. Then all of a sudden, Giannis goes out midway through the third quarter after only having 14 points up to that point. And then Atlanta decided to just run away with it.
Yeah.
At that point, Lou Will started cooking and they just started – and it was like, oh – okay, Atlanta getting serious here. Now, we don't know the extent of the injury, like you said, to Giannis, but the Bucks are bucking. They're doing exactly what a lot of people thought could potentially happen to them.
Yep.
I didn't think going into the game, I figured, okay, it was nice. They showed up. Atlanta's on the move. Man, Atlanta might wind up in the NBA Finals.
Let me tell you something. By the way, it is time for Straight Talk. Is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Put this in perspective. This is what bothers me about Milwaukee. Not only that they lost that game last night, and I get it, Giannis got injured, but that was the third quarter. They were already
midway through the third quarter.
Yeah, it was like 7 minutes left. They were already getting whooped. So I didn't like the way they started, number one. But you go back to when Trae Young got injured in game 3. Atlanta was winning that game. And even though Trae Young got injured when he came back in the fourth quarter, he only scored 3 points, and Milwaukee still barely beat him. And that's with Trae Young injured. And all of their players at full strength That's what upsets. That's what really, I think, frustrates me about Milwaukee.
Do we think Milwaukee is better than what they truly really are because they have
Yes.
a few names?
Yeah.
Do we really think that they are this top 3-4 team out of the East? Because I don't really feel that way. I feel like it's like a healthy Brooklyn Nets team. I don't know, the Sixers, even though the Sixers are at home.
Yeah.
I feel like when you start to look at it, Milwaukee starts to push themselves down to that 4-5 out of the East, but because some lucky breaks got them here in the Eastern Conference Final. That's kind of how I look at it, because to me, they shouldn't even be there.
If KD wore half size smaller,
I know everybody keeps saying that.
Brooklyn would be Atlanta and Brooklyn right about that.
Or if they was healthy.
Yes.
Or if they was remotely healthy, it would be looking different for Milwaukee. Milwaukee would be the team hanging out in Cancun.
Well, and I think we said this on Monday. It looks like the NBA Finals will be the battle of attrition. Whatever team is the healthiest will probably get to the finals. And I'll tell you what, even if you are Phoenix, you better be on your P's and Q's tonight. You better come out ready to play, because last time you pulled a Milwaukee and look what happened to you. The Clippers went after you. You do that again going into LA, all of a sudden that series looks a whole lot different. But for the Bucks, that is a very disappointing loss for them, and probably even a bigger loss now that Giannis is injured, and they've got to find out the severity of the injury.
And Nate McMillan, since taking over, we all know has done a tremendous job. But to continue to have your team step up when the leader is down, I mean, you got to take your hat off to him and being able to motivate those guys and get them to play as hard as they were playing with an opportunity to go down 3-1. Now they've even a score at 2-2. They go back to Milwaukee, a tough environment, but they won in Milwaukee before, so it's not like they can't go back into Milwaukee and win another.
Here's the crazy thing, and again, you give credit to Nate and what he's done with this squad. Before the game, he looked in front of these guys and said, listen, Trey's not with us. I'm sorry, guys. We've been through this before. We've had injuries the entire year, and they're right. Bogdanovich has been injured throughout the year. We've had all kinds of guys. Is injured, and guys have stepped up. They had 4 guys who started for them in double figures. And welcome back to the series, Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich had 20, and he was shooting threes. It was like, whoa, where's that been? That was great for them. And they had 2 guys off the bench who came in and gave you double figures. And Lemon Pepper Lou was cooking, as you pointed out. He gets the start for Trae Young, gives him 21 and 8 assists.
And when you look at Chris Middleton, you would think that he would try and pull a Kevin Durant or Kawhi in the situation. But
coming off that game he just had, too.
But he didn't do well. But remember, it's a road game. And in the playoffs for him, especially in the playoffs, he hasn't really had his best games on the road. If you go back to the Brooklyn Nets series, you look at he was cooking at home.
Yep.
When he got on the road, he disappeared.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a little bit of what we're seeing with him, this up and down kind of Jekyll and Hyde performances when they're on the road.
Isn't that been the season, though, for Middleton?
I don't know that it's been the season.
He has been so inconsistent, and I like him as a player, but he's one of those guys where one night he'll look like a top 50 player in the NBA. You're like, whoa, this dude looks like one of the best players that ever do it. And then the next night, look like a top 80, top 75 player. You're like, where's Middleton?
Well, he's been inconsistent.
Yeah.
And from the regular season to the postseason, he's carried that inconsistency with him. And the only way that they're going to win is for him to hold his end of the bargain, whether Giannis is there or not.
Right.
And I said this yesterday on our show. Giannis is going to always get his box scores, no question about it. I never, ever felt, even though he's got 2 MVPs, and we had Q Richardson on with us yesterday, Quentin Richardson, and he talked about how Giannis doesn't get the necessary respect when the guys consistently are all defensive player, first team this, that, MVP this, that, defensive player of the year.
You know why I said
all those
that?
sort of things.
I looked this up last night. Giannis in the postseason, averaging 29 and 13 in 6.
But it doesn't hurt you.
Right. Now, but here's
as crazy as that may sound, it's not the dagger.
Here's the thing. No one has done that except for Oscar Robertson. He's the only other player to average that in the postseason. But it helps you. So then it gives Middleton the opportunity to say, okay, all I need to do is chip in 20. We good. But you may get it sometimes, and in other games you may not. And that's the problem for Milwaukee.
See, for me, Giannis's box score is great, but I want that box score. I want it to tilt the other way. I want you to get that 30 or whatever it is. Yeah. Get most of that for me in the late third and into the fourth quarter. Don't disappear in crucial situations. You expected Middleton to handle that for you. And as you can see, especially on the road, again, it hasn't been the case. So, I know Giannis is the guy, it's his team, all of those sort of things. But could it truly, really be your team if you're not the closing dude?
Yeah, you're right. Atlanta gets the victory 110-88. This series is now tied up at 2 games apiece. That's the Straight Talk. It's brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No compromise. Straight Talk Wireless. Of course, no contract, no compromise. Hey, KJZ, it is presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests join us on the Goodyear Hotline. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about why Giannis's injury is not the Bucks' only issue. That's next here on KJZ, ESPN Radio, ESPN News.
Lob for Capella, makes the catch in traffic and drops it through. And then runs into Giannis. Both go tumbling down.
Chris Middleton has to step up in the absence of Giannis Antetokounmpo. You got to show up like you showed out